Have you been watching the news about the US and Iran and just scratching your head? I mean, from a normal political point of view, none of it seems to make any sense. The official stories, the things leaders are saying, it all feels contradictory, almost irrational. Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack a theory from a pretty fascinating source that offers a, let's say, radical explanation for it all. The argument is that to really get what's going on, we have to look past politics and dive into a much older and way more powerful kind of script. So let's get into it.
It all kind of starts with these really cryptic statements, like this one. So you're looking at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's holding this book about the ancient wars between the Jews and the Roman Empire. A reporter asks him about it, and he says this: "We lost that war against Rome, but the next war against Rome we must not lose." Now you gotta ask yourself, who is Rome today? The source material we're looking at makes a pretty bold claim. Rome isn't Iran. The source suggests he's actually talking about a future showdown with the great empire of our time, his closest ally, America.
And look, this confusion, it isn't just for us on the outside looking in. This is a U.S. Senator, Richard Blumenthal, and he's just come out of a top-secret White House briefing on the war. Now, this guy is part of the Gang of Eight. That means he's in a tiny circle of leaders who get the absolute highest level intelligence. And what's his takeaway? He's angry. He says he has more questions than answers, and he's worried the U.S. is marching towards putting boots on the ground in Iran, with Russia already back in the other side. I mean, that is a stunning, stunning lack of clarity from the very people who are supposed to be in the know.
And then you get this. This is just a jaw-dropping exchange. An NBC News reporter asks Iran's foreign minister if he's scared of a U.S. ground invasion, and his answer, "No, we are waiting for them." He literally says it's a trap they've been setting for 20 years, and that it would be a big disaster for the United States. The reporter is so blown away he actually has to ask him again to make sure he heard right. I mean, come on, that's not the kind of thing a fearful country says. That's the language of someone who thinks they're following a pre-written script to victory.
So what is going on here? You've got a defiant Iran, a totally confused U.S. Senate, and an Israeli prime minister talking about a new war with Rome. The source material argues that geopolitics just on its own cannot explain this. It's like we need to look at a totally different operating system that's running in the background for all these major players, and it's a religious one.
And that operating system is called eschatology. Yeah, it's a big, fancy theological term, but our source breaks it down pretty simply. It's just a story about how the world ends. And what makes it so powerful is that it gives people a divine plan, a mission. It answers those huge questions we all have. Where did we come from? Why are we even here? And where is all of this going?
Okay, so this brings us to the absolute core theory from our source, the law of eschatological convergence. The idea is this: if you can actually identify the end-time scripts for all the big players, the Christian script, the Jewish script, the Islamic script, and then find the points where those scripts converge, where they overlap or agree on what happens next, you can predict their behavior with unbelievable accuracy. It's a way of finding the one path that everyone, whether they know it or not, is actually walking down together.
So why is this convergence so incredibly powerful? Well, the source uses a concept from game theory to explain it. To win any conflict, you need three things. You need mass, which is just your number of people. You need energy, which is how motivated they are. And then you need coordination. And as you can see, coordination is the real game changer here. It's the ultimate force multiplier.
So how do you get perfect coordination? Well, a strong leader is great, but leaders die. Family ties, they're strong, but they break. They lead to internal conflicts. But a story, a shared narrative, that can transcend time and space. And the most powerful narrative of all, eschatology. It gives everyone a complete script where they all know their part. It's a story that can coordinate billions of people over centuries. The source basically says it's the most powerful force in all of human history.
All right, so let's dig into the details. If we're going to apply this theory, we have to decode the most extreme, kind of accelerationist versions of these end-time scripts. And why the extreme versions? Because, as the source argues, it's the most fanatical believers who work the hardest and end up dragging everyone else along for the ride.
Okay, first up, there's an extreme version of Jewish eschatology. Now, mainstream Jewish belief is all about living righteously and waiting for God to send the Messiah. But this accelerationist view, which a lot of people consider heretical, says you can't just wait. It says believers have to force the Messiah's arrival by making the prophecies happen themselves. That means creating the state of Israel, bringing all the Jews back, defeating all their enemies, and, this is the big one, building a third temple in Jerusalem. Next, you have Christian Zionist eschatology, and this is where it gets wild. This script basically copies and pastes the Jewish plan. It supports creating Israel, it supports building the third temple.
But, and this is a massive but, the Jewish Messiah who's supposed to rule from that temple, in their script, that figure is the Antichrist. They believe this Antichrist will unite the world, but then turn on the Jews. And at that exact moment, Jesus will return, defeat the Antichrist, save the Jewish people, and boom, trigger the rapture for all true Christians.
The Islamic end-time stories are, in a lot of ways, a direct response to all of this. Mainstream Islam also believes that Jesus will return to defeat a figure of ultimate evil, an Antichrist, but they call him the Dajjal. Now, the Shia version, which is what's dominant in Iran, has a really key difference. They believe that their long-awaited 12th Imam, the Mahdi, will return first to lead all the believers in that final epic battle against the Dajjal.
And this isn't just a Middle Eastern thing. This slide shows how other major world powers fit right into these scripts. The source points to some Catholic traditions that see the current Anglo-American world order as the city of man, which has to fall before the city of God can be reestablished. And then there's Russian Orthodoxy with the Third Rome prophecy. This idea says Moscow is the final home of true Christianity. But for that to happen, they have to retake Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul, and that would mean the absolute end of NATO.
So, okay. We've got all these different, competing, seemingly contradictory end-time scripts. It's a mess, right? But the whole point of this theory is to find where they stop competing and start aligning. Where do all these different stories, despite all their unique heroes and villains, actually agree on what's going to happen next? And let me tell you, the points where they converge are terrifyingly specific.
So check this out. This is the terrifying part. According to our source, these are the key points where all the scripts line up. First, every single script either requires the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque to build a third temple, or they just don't care if it happens. Second, they all predict the rise of some kind of powerful one-world government based in Jerusalem. Third, they all see a final cataclysmic war, the War of Gog and Magog. And finally, and this is a huge one in every single script, the United States and China are no longer major players. They just fade away. They're irrelevant on the world stage.
So, if these points of convergence are like a shared roadmap that everyone's following, then according to the source, we can actually make some incredibly specific predictions about the major global events we should expect to see happen. And this is where the theory goes from being just an analysis to a concrete and pretty chilling forecast.
So based on that convergence, the source lays out a very specific chain of events. It starts with the US putting boots on the ground in Iran. This triggers a national draft and massive civil unrest that basically takes America off the world stage. The war that follows causes the economies of the Gulf states to totally collapse, which allows them to be absorbed into a greater Israel. Then Turkey and Saudi Arabia get dragged into the war and are basically broken. In the chaos, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is destroyed. From all this destruction, Iran emerges even stronger, and it allies with Russia to form that prophesied Gog and Magog alliance. The final act? The total destruction of NATO and Europe, which fulfills that Russian Orthodox prophecy.
So, what are we supposed to do with all of this? The source lays out a really powerful, if pretty unsettling way of looking at the world. It paints a picture of the future that, frankly, seems to be unfolding right in front of us. And that leaves us with one last big, provocative question. Is this whole thing just an analytical model that happens to be really good at predicting things? Or are we actually watching powerful groups of believers actively working to make their shared ancient prophecies a reality? Is this destiny, or is it a script that's being intentionally performed for all of us?